Okay, I'm going to open it.
Okay.
Well, I don't know where others. Sorry, I had too many tabs. Good morning, friends.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Yeah, so hey everybody. I'm gonna keep watching those little boxes appear. But it is 12 noon and welcome to our business development series. Jake, if you want to take it from here.
Sure. Thank you, Leslie, and welcome everybody to our presentation on turn caregiver turnover into tenure proven retention strategies for Massachusetts agencies. My name is Jake Krilovich, and I'm the executive director of the Home Care Alliance of Massachusetts. We are a nonprofit trade association with over 200 home care, home health, and hospice agencies across the state. And if someone could switch to the next slide. So just before we get started, for everyone's awareness, we are recording the webinar. We will send a link to the webinar with the slide deck afterwards. All attendees are muted as of now, and then we will have an opportunity at the end for some question and answers. And so our agenda today is going to be a discussion around turnover and retention. I will defer to my colleagues and our member from CareSmart, Carolina and Ruby, to give a brief overview of CareSmart's. And in the meantime, I do invite everybody in the chat to introduce themselves, maybe let us know if you have any good plans for Labor Day weekend. After this, I will introduce our panelists, and then we'll have a brief discussion, and again, followed by a question and answer. So I've already introduced myself, but I'll allow Ruby and Carolina to introduce themselves.
Sure. My name is Carolina. I'm an account executive at CareSmarts 360. Thank you so much, Jake, for inviting us on here. Little fun fact about me. So I have worked in health and age tech for the past few years, but I started my career in retirement living and I was a caregiver 20 plus years ago. So the topic of discussion is one that is very dear to my heart, and I'm very excited to help move our discussions along today.
Thank you, Carolina. My name is Ruby, and I have been working with CareSmarts for over 10 years now. And it's interesting to see how technology has come a long way, especially in home care community. And when it comes to caregiver retention, that's been a hot topic for years now. And for anyone new to us here at CareSmarts, I would like to just take a moment to introduce what CareSmarts is and how are we helping agencies manage or really work through the challenges, so many different challenges in home care through technology. So CareSmarts is a HIPAA-compliant, AI-powered home care platform spanning scheduling to billing to EVV and client and family portal and even caregiver mobile apps for visit verification. Our aim is really simple at CareSmarts. We remove administrative friction so caregivers and care coordinators can spend more time delivering quality care and less time wrestling with tools. That's all we care about. And if you're using more than 2 systems today to manage your scheduling, EVV billing, or whatever you do through technology, that's fragmentation. And fragmentation is the real reason, and often that shows up later as turnover. So that's why CareSmarts, when it comes to caregiver retention, caregiver turnover, plays a really important role, implementing the right technology, less technology, I would say, to remove that administrative burden. With that, I would like to really jump on the topic and invite Jake to talk about why caregivers. It is a huge problem, but especially in Massachusetts, how would you explain it, Jake?
Yeah, so I think that our workforce has a crisis across the board, not unique to Massachusetts. It's a nationwide issue, and even outside of our industry, we have workforce shortages across many sectors. I think that, of course, the number one reason for our workforce turnover and shortages have to do with pay and compensation. But I think as you dig into data, there are a couple of other factors, right? And so just to level set, in Massachusetts, according to our Centers for Health Information and Analysis, CHIA, as we call it, the turnover for direct care workers, which encompasses home health aides and homemakers and personal care aides, is around 40%. For nurses, it's around 30%. And so I think that this has a direct correlation to the compensation and oftentimes the reimbursement from Medicare, Medicaid, and Medicare Advantage plans and managed care. But I think that there are a number of other factors that we're going to talk to today, right? If you look in the data, compensation is always number one, but not too far behind it is things like safety and how the caregivers are feeling in the home, whether they feel like they're being heard as it relates to safety out in the field. But so too is around their onboarding, the support that they have from their employers, as well as productivity. And I think when I look at, again, from that CHIA survey, oftentimes when we talk about reimbursement cuts, right, we have our CMS is proposing additional cuts to the Medicare home health benefit, right? And we often scream from the rooftops that this is going to reduce access, right? And it certainly will. But I think when you look at the data, particularly from CHIA, the number one response that providers have when they have workforce shortages is that they ask their existing staff to do more, right? Work more hours. They also ask them to take on additional tasks. And number three in that list is that they will limit new intakes. So I think we often think that the immediate response from a provider is to limit new intakes, but that actually isn't what the data shows. It shows that we're actually turning to the existing staff and asking them to do more and take on more hours. And so I think that that's what's leading to this burnout and emotional and schedule overload. I think that our industry for many years has prided itself on flexibility and autonomy out in the field. But that has changed significantly in the last 10 years where we are asking the workforce to do more, again, with that lower pay and compensation issues. And with, as it relates to our aid workforce, I think in Massachusetts, where our minimum wage has climbed to $15 an hour in the last 5 years, and really at this point, you're not going to find even a retail or a restaurant opportunity that pays less than $20, $18 an hour. That is the number one competitor at this point. I think for our clinicians and our therapy staff, facility opportunities in nursing homes and hospitals have made it difficult for home care providers to compete. I would also note, right, the slide here notes advancement paths, and I think that the state of Massachusetts, with our association and other associations from different sectors, have talked a lot about career paths. And I think that both the state is thinking about this, but I think providers too have to think about this. I think that when we hire staff, whether it's a nurse or an aide, the industry and really the whole healthcare system has to be a little clearer in illustrating what those pathways are for staff to advance themselves, whether that's upskilling of our aid workforce, or what career opportunities might an LPN have to transition into an RN or a home health aide up to an LPN. And lastly, again, going back to data and reports that we see, Onboarding and support systems are critical, and I don't want to get ahead of the slides. We'll talk a little bit about that in future slides.
Before I jump into this slide, Jake, I'm fascinated by some of the facts that you just shared, especially because, with CareSmarts, we talk to people in all the states and provinces, and the minimum wage in Massachusetts is not a lower one, and how that affects what happens when a caregiver leaves. So it's fascinating to know that you're competing with the allure of a job that might be in a different industry because that minimum wage is not the lowest, So it's very interesting to see that. So with the tactics that we want to use, we'll talk about kind of creating a strategy down the line today. But with retention tactics that truly work, off the top, it could be recognition and rewards that are meaningful to the caregiver, onboarding and mentorship that can also definitely speak also to what you mentioned earlier about advancements. Where can we go from here? First, meaningful onboarding, good onboarding, and then a path forward in your career path as a caregiver. And then the way that we build our culture to be a priority within each agency. So, given that you work with agencies of all different shapes and sizes, and you've seen a lot out there, how would you advise or recommend that the agencies that have logged on today, move that culture within their agency or begin to build it and those recognition programs? Where would they start with that?
Yeah, I think that, and right, technology is one aspect to this, and we'll talk a little bit about that, right? It's particularly around rewards and recognition. There's a lot of different tools out there, softwares, business solution providers that have these reward programs where you can reward caregivers for either taking on additional shifts or I think we're seeing in EVV right now, there's talk about how do we reward the clinicians with better compliance and whatnot, right? I think rewards is something that people respond to, but not everybody. And I think that's where you get into the culture aspect of onboarding. And right, first impressions always make the lasting impact. And I think I'm preaching to the choir here, right? You're all operating as providers in the field, but it's an isolating job. And I think when you look at why turnover is so high in our industry, home care is not for everybody. You're asking a clinician or an aide to come into the fold and go out into someone's home, and they're isolated, and maybe they don't have experience in home care, right? They're used to a facility-based care where they have that network of support. And so we'll talk a little bit about mentorship, but really when the caregiver comes into the door, there's so much that there are reports out there that show how important that onboarding process is, whether it's a matter of offering your onboarding and your employment documents in multiple languages. Do you have a person there supporting that new employee to fill out those forms? Are you allowing them to do it electronically to make it more efficient for them, right? And then once they are in the door, something as simple as having your CEO or someone from your leadership team going around and shaking the hands of a new caregiver goes a long way as it relates to retention and that 60 to 90-day retention. So I think just creating that culture from the start to support the caregivers right when they walk through your door is critical.
Yeah. I wonder, Jake, just on what you just shared with us, when you're, meeting with agencies and getting to know what has been successful and not, I'm wondering if you see any trends on agencies that are being started by somebody that was a caregiver. Do you ever see that the culture is built differently, just having somebody own an agency that does have experience being in the field? Because you're correct, caregivers are out there doing their thing and the world is all remote now, but caregivers have been in that situation way before the pandemic, kind of in that isolating. And I'm wondering if you see that there are kind of an understanding when agencies have leadership even that have experienced the role of caregiver.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think for some of our more established agencies, right, our 100-year-old VNAs, I think often are led by clinicians who used to work in the field. And I think from what I hear across the board is that many of them continue to either do their own visits or certainly go on ride-alongs with the staff. And I think, of course, that's an important aspect. As far as former caregivers who start their own agencies, we do see a lot of that in Massachusetts. We do not have licensure for home care services in Massachusetts for non-medical home care services. And so I think that that has invited and encouraged a lot of caregivers to step out and go out on their own. And I think, many of them are successful. I think it's also, as many on this call will know, it's a difficult thing to run and start an agency. And so I think that while you have that experience in the field, and that certainly can inform and make you successful in this, I think there are some other aspects to running a home care agency that are difficult that maybe are underestimated by caregivers.
Right. Yeah. And I feel that there's so much coming at you that it's easy to forget about this piece of it, the onboarding, and you just want to get everyone at work and get those shifts filled and make sure that they're clocking in and clocking out and getting that care. But it sounds like hopefully when an agency, really understands how this is going to affect you in that 60 to 90 days after, the expense of onboarding new caregivers is not cheap. So yeah, it's important for sure. So we'll move on to our next slide. And this one I'm definitely going to throw to Ruby, because not only are you, vice president at CareSmarts, but you have also been on the developer side. And so you've been able to see how technology, can improve engagement or retention, but then also just kind of how technology can also be a frustration for if not implemented and used correctly or developed correctly. So Ruby, can you speak to how technology fits into our topic today?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. So I will backtrack a little for on the last slide, we talked about all the tactics. They're great on their own, but if we infuse technology while we are onboarding or recognition programs, award programs, it just becomes measurable, repeatable. It's easier for people to really operate with technology. So technology blends really well if you are using it right. Not too much. Not too much is another administrative burden. So on the tech side, think about tools that really lighten the administrative load. Mobile first apps that reduces tabs and confusion, smart automation that just nudges the right behavior, AI chatbots today. They support caregivers in the moment where they need quick answers, quick workflows, and maybe it's the off hours and the care coordinators are not available, or maybe the office staff is not available. That's when technology comes into play. The goal here is not gadgets. It's less friction, more connection. We just want to help caregivers to the support that they need. We want to help with technology so they get that support, which is really dependent on their office staff and agencies' reps availability. Tangible examples here to call out, like clean mobile timekeeping and visit verification, instead of them calling the office to maybe do some changes. If they have the technology in place, they can just do those things on their own. And that really helps. They don't have to take 3 extra steps to do something that's pretty easy on technology. Smart shift matching that reduces back and forth. If they have specific experience and agency has specific clients with requirements, then smart matching really helps instead of that back and forth communication that really adds a lot of frustration sometimes when it's not working out. And human errors, we all know it happens. And then if it's a mismatch, then you are not servicing your clients right too. Another thing is quick feedback. Caregivers, their jobs are like they do their jobs all day long, but then there is no one to ask them sometimes how they feel about it, or if they have any specific feedback. So if we have technology in place that really helps capture that quick feedback after every visit or after every week or something like that, that fuels recognition. And that really helps. As I said in the beginning of the slide, the tactics that we use and everything that we really plan to use in an environment that helps, that works, it's great, but technology will just make it measurable and repeatable. So we're not making errors, and we are increasing engagement and retention.
And Ruby, I know you talked a little bit about AI, and it's like illegal to not bring up AI now on any call about technology. So I didn't want it, that's a crime. But when I think about what we're doing now and our competitors as well, AI is one of the big topics of the day. I guess not every technology partner takes feedback and then puts it to development as a priority. And so, how would you recommend that an agency, what are some of the recommendations when agencies are trying to pick their technology partners, so that it truly is a partnership and kind of something that grows and evolves as the needs change? Because caregiver demands are changing as well. Any recommendations, best practices when they're assessing technology partners?
Yeah. Two main points here. I mean, I can go on and on about it, but just two things here to think about. One, technology, the products that are out in the market, they're pretty standard. So choose what's best for you. Not every products are not built for specific processes. And every agency, I have met with thousands of agencies over the years. And every agency will tell me that we do things differently. We have our own way of doing so and so. So when you are picking any product or when you are evaluating products, just see how customizable or configurable that product is. So you are not changing your processes, your workflows to really fit into their box. Instead, that technology should fit into your workflows and your processes. That's number one. Not every product is great for everybody. Just look at how they can configure and customize it for you. Second thing, I think it's people usually don't look at it that way, but definitely check out how they are and how frequently they are upgrading their product. Time is changing, technology is changing, problems are changing too. So just check, and people who update the products that are innovative and the companies that update their products frequently, they are always put that information in the public domain. So always check their websites or social media or whatsoever and see how frequently they're upgrading and updating, and whatever they are upgrading, is it matching the trends? Are they innovating, or they're just following traditional technology methods? So that these are my top two recommendations when choosing or evaluating technology.
Great. And Jake, do you have any thoughts or anecdotes to share about technology in the space of this topic of engagement?
I think Ruby put it well. I think like interoperability is important. I think remembering the caregiver's experience in this whole thing is important, right? Providers are pressured by reimbursement and a shrinking reimbursement and an increased regulatory landscape, which invites technology to kind of augment that your operations. I think it's just important to remember the caregiver's experience in this as we talk about flexibility and sort of their job satisfaction. If you have them working on one tablet for your EVV system, another tablet for your EMR or whatnot, and then if you're going to invite some sort of caregiver rewards program on their cell phone, I think we've got to think about that experience. And again, I think Ruby put it well. I was at a conference and a speaker had likened our experience and where we're at with AI right now to when microwaves were first introduced into our society, where when a microwave was introduced, we were putting everything into it and kind of seeing what worked and what didn't. And over time, we learned that, when you put pizza in a microwave, it just doesn't quite work. And I think that that's where we're at with AI. And I think we have to figure out, both as providers and advocates, what works and what doesn't. And I think our policymakers too are kind of working through what works and what doesn't. And so I think due diligence, of course, is important, like Ruby had outlined, when you're kind of exploring different technologies and AI functions to introduce into your agency.
Yeah. And I guess, at the end of the day, technology must be approached with a strategy. So you've got your goal and then you've got to put a strategy in place. So we know what we encourage our attendees today to think about adding in or improving to improve turnover and make that into tenure. But let's talk about strategies. So when you're speaking to an agency, Jake, where do we begin with building a strategy to achieve these goals?
Well, like I said, right, hopefully someone from the leadership team is making an introduction to the new staff, right? And also who are you surrounding them with for support as they, get introduced to your agency? And also making clear within your organization, what are the opportunities out there for a caregiver? If you're a home health aide today, what might you be, in a year from now, if you want that, right? We also have to talk about, if we have home health aides who love to be home health aides, we have to embrace them and also talk about the pathways they have within that career for upskilling and training opportunities. And as it relates to rewards, I think a reward could be monetary, but a reward could be like I said, a pat on the back or words of support, and also that feedback cycle from caregivers to their supervisor and leadership, not only to provide feedback on their performance, but also on the employer's performance and experience for the employee. And again, I talked about safety earlier, right? Safety can be talked about as what are we doing to train the workforce so that they feel safe in the home around de-escalation and whatnot. But what too are you providing the employee for them to come to you or to their supervisor as to what they're experiencing in the home? And so it's not just an environment where the employee has to feel like they can't speak up about what they saw or what they experienced. We have a tough political culture, right? Our workforce is, 95% female and over half people of color, right? So there's a lot of exposure there to them having negative experiences in the home. And so just making sure that there's a supportive culture for the employee from day one, I think goes a long way in terms of retention, right? You can put all the technology at them in the world to improve their experience as a caregiver, but sometimes it's just a matter of making sure that they're heard no matter who they are.
Yeah. I really, really like the piece where you mentioned, who loves being a caregiver? Who are those people? And if you're not building in those feedback opportunities, you may not even know who loves it and where you want to invest. So that was something really meaningful for me that I'm hearing from you, just because I was a caregiver. And so
Yeah.
take eager folks that want to stay and make an opportunity to reinforce how important they are. So something so simple, but what a difference that can make.
Yeah,
So
I think sorry, I think for so long in our advocacy with the state and federal government around career pathways, so much of that advocacy talked about, how do we move a homemaker into an LPN and an RN, right? And there was so much talk and work to do that, and I think that that's dismissive of our aide workforce, right? If we have aides who love that job and are good at it and want to make themselves better at it, I think we have to embrace them, and we can't just make it seem like this is one pipeline into a higher,
yeah,
skilled clinician setting. So.
yeah, absolutely. Um, yeah. Thanks for that. So when we talk about loyalty, longevity, over our discussions today, it's come up a couple times that we might be losing caregivers to jobs out of industry, or maybe even to competition to other agencies. So let's talk about strengthening caregiver loyalty and longevity. We've talked about a lot of those, points of things that make a difference. But yeah, I'd love for you to speak about. I mean, first of all, when a caregiver is experiencing a decision of whether they're going to stay or leave, some of the things that are going to be, affecting the decision is, what is their work-life balance like? What's the flexibility that their employer is affording them, or even based on like the industry? Does this work for me, and et cetera, but also mental health as well. Caregiver burnout is real, even for a family caregiver. And so, can you speak a little bit about mental health, flexibility? What are some of the things you're seeing that that our caregivers demand in order to stay in the industry and in our agency specifically?
Yeah, well, I think I mentioned earlier around flexibility, and that has always been a benefit of in-home care, right? I think that that is, like I said earlier, it's getting harder and harder given the pressures on providers themselves around reimbursement and also the workforce shortages. And then that data that I referenced that shows that during a workforce shortage, you don't necessarily, yes, you do limit intakes, but oftentimes we're asking your existing staff to do more. So I think we've got to keep that front of mind, what we're asking the staff to do to try and maintain that flexible schedule. And then as you talked about competing against other opportunities in retail and whatnot, right now you're seeing Amazon drivers or Instacart opportunities, right? That where the worker can really make their own schedule, and that's getting harder and harder in our industry. I think too, right? Boston, Massachusetts traffic is really difficult, and that's why we're seeing agencies with higher minimums for what hours they'd like to do, and particularly in the private pay space, right, to try and mitigate the caregiver's drive time and whatnot. And I think when we talk about CMS cuts or Medicaid lack of reimbursement, that's when we talk about shrinking service areas. This is why agencies are doing this, because it's harder and harder to get clinicians or aides to go to multiple homes or to longer distances because of that. So I know that providers are thinking about this, but it's got to be front of mind. And then, around mental health support for caregivers, I think, again, right, it's always compensation at the top, but really right behind it around the safety and how they feel supported is so important. I've talked to a few members who have regular support groups for their caregivers. Perhaps maybe in the hospice space, if one of the caregiver's clients passed away, right? How do you respond to that for your caregivers right afterward? I think goes a long way in making an employee feel supported. And I don't want to get ahead on the mentorship. We'll talk a little bit about mentorship next.
Yeah, absolutely. We can move to the next slide. Okay, so mentorship as a retention strategy. Um, Jake, I'm going to throw to you because my understanding is
Sure.
that you developed quite the program. And so please tell us about this.
Yeah, in the immediate aftermath of the pandemic, through the American Rescue Plan Act funds, the Home Care Alliance got an almost $1 million grant to implement a mentorship program for home health aides. And I'm not going to read this slide word for word, but in effect, what the grant did was it allowed us to set up a program using a mentorship curriculum that we would implement into an agency. And I think we had around 25 agencies participate, where the program would train an existing home health aide who's been with the agency for some time and maybe in the industry for some time, and you would train them how to mentor a new hired home health aide. And so what the agencies would do, you would hire an agency, you would match them up with an existing mentor, and they would have regular meetings and touch points over time. And it really, the results were really incredible, right? As it says on the slide, the retention rate when we started the grant for this this subset of agencies was 66.4%. After the grant, it skyrocketed to 96.97%, which is really incredible improvement in retention. And I think that we saw a lot of other things through the grant outside of that retention rate. We saw, right, increases in their satisfaction and how they felt onboarded. They had better job confidence and whatnot. I think what agencies really saw was referrals from their new hires. They were referring their friends or colleagues from other jobs to say, come work for this agency that I'm working at. It's got a great culture and they've really supported me. And I think that in itself saves the participants a lot of money in recruitment, right? The biggest recruitment cost around job advertisements and whatnot. This was a mouth to mouth, a referral from peers. And so, I would say the grant went really well. I think we wished we could have spent more of our grant dollars, but we struggled to because a lot of agencies were struggling to hire new home health aides, which I think speaks as well to the issue that we're having right now. And then lastly, I would just say, this grant relied on technology. We partnered with Navan, which is an LMS system that kind of implemented the curriculum of mentoring. But I would say, anything I just said, an agency could do today, right? You don't need technology necessarily to match up an existing home health aide who you think would be a great mentor with a new hire. I think that agencies can do a lot here without, having to spend that investment on technology or whatnot.
So just to go back, is this program, and I'm sorry if I missed it, but is the mentorship program that was developed specific for Massachusetts?
It was actually developed by the New York Association. And so we licensed the curriculum, and Navan had worked with the New York Association to license it and adapt it into their technology.
Okay. And there's so many things that the mentorship program to me hits with all of those kind of tactics and strategies that can lead to, tenure. Because I'm hearing that, okay, how do you make allow or give that caregiver the recognition that they really love what they do. They're not looking for advancement in the ways that we talked about going up to an RN, for example, and going back to school. But already it's going to give them that pride to know that they're so good at their job that they've now been provided with somebody that they can mentor, and then automatically having an immediate peer connection when that person starts with the agency. And so that program is incredible. And if anybody wants more information about that, will they be provided with some information after the call?
Yes, we can do that. Now, the grant has ended, and the way that the grant worked was we got that, grant money, which allowed us to pay a stipend to the mentor for that mentor time. So the grant has ended, but we do have resources and through Navan and whatnot, right? This is still a program that an agency, if they did want to do it through a company like Navan, could, and we can share that information. And Leslie, we have our website, which has additional information on the grant.
Well, that's great, and I encourage everyone to look into it because of what's been built. I'm still looking at the number 96.97 retention rate. All right, so lots of people joined today. I'm tempted to do a poll of whether Boston traffic is better or worse than Toronto. And to be honest with you, Jake, I'm pretty sure Toronto's worse. I'm just going to go ahead and take that one. It took me about 30 minutes to drive 2 kilometers the other day, and I'll let you do the conversion to miles. Uh, so here we are, everybody. Obviously, there's still such a big interest in this topic, and I see already that there are some questions, I think maybe in the chat. We have a question here from E. Roy. Has anyone found programs that train nurse mentors? Mentoring is a specific skill, and not everyone comes out of the egg pre-equipped with that skill set. Any resources for their nurses, Jake?
I would have to dig out. All I would say is this is a topic that the Alliance has worked on for the Alliance, its members, the industry has worked on for many years, is around this sort of, nurse preceptorship opportunities, apprentice opportunities for nurses. It has been difficult in both that, of course, home health agencies they don't have the funding to implement these programs widely. A lot of nursing schools are not aware or really interested in partnering with home health agencies themselves. So I think that this has been something that both the higher education system and also the state and the industry have kind of tried to work on a lot, but I don't have a lot there. But if someone else in the chat wants to share something.
Yeah. And we are open for any questions that can be typed into the chat, or if you feel that you'd like to share your voice, and we'd love to hear a question that way as well. Just note that everyone right now is muted. So if you'd like to share, just unmute yourself for a moment, or you're welcome to type in the chat. And a fun fact about Navan, they are also based in Toronto as well.
They are.
Yeah, if you could just go over maybe the mentorship program takeaways again, Jake.
Yeah. Sorry,
Yes.
I just saw another question came in around virtual versus in-person feedback. I would have to dig in on the virtual versus in-person feedback. I know that they had those scheduled meetings every week. I think for the majority of them were virtually, but I do think that many of them came in to meet in person. Um, I think, like we said, it improved the culture. I think just kind of building that support system among between the new hire and the existing aide. And then I think again, right, those mentors really felt like they gained some leadership experience and kind of developed their own careers. Um, and again, lastly, on the organic recruitment impact, right, those mentees started referring their own peers, which was an unexpected result of the grant.
Yeah. And I suppose based on our, the industry being so remote and being also isolating in a way, uh, feedback from other caregivers on the culture of an agency, it must just be growing so much as, an indication of what's going to happen with your workforce. Because as a former caregiver, we kind of follow each other around. So, if you find a good place, you're going to let people know, and the cost of recruiting is so expensive. So that's definitely a major takeaway that I'd love everyone to really, really keep in mind as you move forward. All right.
I'm going to chime in for no particular reason because no one asked my opinion. But if you take a look at the website and you scroll down, you'll find that the mentors were teaching the class in the provider's language, speaking the language that they speak. And I don't, yes, in this case, it happens to be Spanish, but in a lot of ways, I think language and communication is a community response. So speaking the language one speaks in the language they're ready to hear it, and that can be generational as well as foreign or domestic, right? So I think like to Ernie's point, finding the right mentor because the person who's able to do these things, and then obviously it's giving the mentor the tools to develop their teaching skills in the language that they speak.
Yeah, and that's totally, it's awesome. And I know as somebody that grew up in a Tagalog home, it is always meaningful when when somebody can do this communication in the language that they're most comfortable and at home with, for sure. So I appreciate your feedback there, Leslie. If there aren't any other thoughts, I want to thank everybody for joining. Jake, thank you very much for organizing this and for all of the information you've shared. To Ruby and Leslie for doing all of the hard work of administratively making this happen. And for everybody for spending their lunch hour with me. I hope that you all order some food and got to enjoy a bite to eat away from the busyness of the day. We appreciate you. And of course, the recording will be available and we'll send out some resources as well.
Thank you, Carolina.
Thank you.
So much, everyone. Have
Thank
a
you,
wonderful
everybody.
Bye.
Bye.